Wonderful. Well, good morning. My name is Stacy Brennan. I am the curator of education for the Lehigh University Art Galleries. I am pleased to be here with you today in partnership with Deirdre Murphy. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background. For Art and Dialogue lecture, Art and Climate Change, which is a first-year seminar and a visiting artist lecture series to discuss the intersection between art and climate change. This event is part of LUAG, as we call ourselves, Lehigh University Art Galleries, Art and Dialogue series, which is an interdisciplinary conversation between members of the university and the wider community, reflecting the ways in which their work is dynamically engaged with other fields of inquiry. And there is no better person to do that than I think Rebecca Rutstein, who is our featured artist today. I'm going to turn the mic over to Deirdre Murphy, professor in the Art, Architecture, and Design department. And Deirdre, I'll have you take it away from here.
Thank you, Stacy, and thanks to LUAG for co-hosting this. So Rebecca Rutstein is an amazing artist. She is a multidisciplinary artist and also part ocean explorer, which you're going to hear about. She has worked at the intersection of art and science for, 20, 30 years now, and is a painter. She's a muralist, sculptor, and public art installation. So a really wide range of art making, which you'll see today. And all research-based, which is really important since we're at a research-based institution. She went to undergrad at Cornell and graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania, which is how we met. And we've been dear friends for many, many years. Her work exists in so many different public collections, most notably the Philadelphia Museum of Art, Yale, the Georgia Museum of Art. You can go on her website, look at her awesome bio, and you'll see the list is quite long. Multiple grants and residencies have enabled her to continue her research. She's been featured on NPR, ABC, CBS, Wall Street Journal, Vogue, and more. And her expeditions have traveled her all over the globe. Right now, of course, she's a very prolific artist, and right now she has two shows up. One is called Blue Dreams, and that's at the National Academy of Science in Washington, D.C., which is wonderful to get the artwork out into the science museums. And then Sublime Nature opens, I think, next week, and that's at the Delaware County Community College, where they're also reading the same book that we are, Under the Sky We Make. So there's a lot of synergy and connections going on. And without further ado, I'd like to turn the Zoom screen and mic over to Rebecca. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Deirdre. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me today. As Deirdre mentioned, my name is Rebecca Rutstein. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm based in Philadelphia, and for over 20 years, I've been creating work inspired by the natural world. While I started off primarily as a painter, my work has expanded to include painting, sculpture, interactive installation, and public art. And I would say delving into public art has really kind of transformed my practice in terms of realizing the kind of scale and scope I want my work to have, and also the kind of access that I want my work to have in the community. For the past 8 years, I have been collaborating with scientists on research vessels at sea. And it's been those experiences and those relationships that have really kind of changed my artistic trajectory and really shaped it. And I would say, I would go so far as to say shaped the person I am now. I feel really passionately about creating visual and immersive experiences that can shed light on places and processes hidden from view to connect people more deeply with the natural world and systems in the natural world as a means to create empathy and foster stewardship in the face of our climate crisis. And I always think of, there's a famous quote from Jacques Cousteau, "You only protect what you love." And so for me, I want to create experiences that connect people and create more of a sense of love for the natural world. I'm going to take you on an abbreviated journey of my artistic trajectory. And it starts off in Ithaca, New York, where I fell in love with both painting and geology. I was taking a science class for non-science majors, informally called Rocks for Jocks. And it was a geology class where I learned all about these kind of processes happening underneath the surface that are causing upheaval above the surface. This really spoke to me at the time, but it didn't really weave its way into my artistic practice for many years. It wasn't until after, even a few years after graduate school, that I started weaving this idea into my practice. And essentially, you know, I was in my 20s and it was a tumultuous time. And all of a sudden, this idea of this metaphor of forces causing upheaval on the surface really resonated for me as a metaphor for interpersonal relationships. And so I started kind of thinking about plate tectonics and weaving these diagrams into my paintings. From there, it became a real pursuit to try to understand and learn about the geology of different regions. And so I started applying for art residencies in different locations around the world to learn about geology and to create narratives about them. And so I found myself in the Canadian Rockies for 2 summers. And then I ended up in Hawaii in 2005. And in Hawaii, in the process of learning about, you know, volcanism and the forces at play to create the islands, I came upon this map of the ocean floor. This sonar map, it's a multi-beam sonar map. It's imaged through sound waves. And I was just really enthralled with this idea that sound could create image and that we could see this incredible landscape that's hidden from view. I wanted to go there. I became more interested in that world than I did with the islands themselves. And so in my naivete, I called up Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, which owns the only or runs the only publicly operated submersible in the country. And I called them up and said, hey, I'm an artist. How do you get down in a submersible down to the bottom of the ocean? And they kind of just hung up on me. I tabled that dream for a while and just started thinking about the ocean in my own sort of imaginative way and by doing research and looking at found maps of the ocean floor. And I started making paintings sort of like this that were incorporating these sort of found maps and creating these sort of layered kind of images in my work. Around this time, I also created an homage to a cartographer named Marie Tharp, who worked with echo soundings, these sound waves that I was talking about, to create enormous maps of the ocean floor. And she was really instrumental in us understanding what we understand today as the mechanism for continental drift, which is plate tectonics. She was a real inspiration to me, and I created this installation at the Philadelphia International Airport. And at the time, you know, I was sort of weaving in kind of recognizable imagery in my paintings. Was becoming dissatisfied with this inability for the viewer to get lost in the work because of these references to scale. And so I started really trying to think about how I could create paintings that would have more ambiguity. And so as I did this, I started paring down imagery and removing any kind of reference to scale, and became more interested in sort of working with these wireframe topographic maps of the ocean floor. And I landed around here in 2012, really kind of pushing the ambiguity in terms of looking at work that might read as micro or macro worlds. And so I like this idea that you could be looking through a microscope or looking at satellite imagery of, say, the contour of a continent. And so I enjoyed this moment of having the viewer be lost in the piece. Around this time, 2012, I finally went back out to do another residency. It had been several years. I, in the meantime, was busy getting married and having 2 babies. And that sort of shifted, of course, my whole trajectory. And it wasn't until 2012 that I ended up back out on doing an art residency. And I couldn't think of a better place to go than Iceland, which is geologically speaking, one of the most fascinating places on Earth. It's actually in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on the Mid-Atlantic Ridge where 2 plates are separating, and you have volcanism and you have glaciers, and it's literally the land of fire and ice. And so I was incredibly inspired there, doing research and spending a lot of time on the glaciers. and wanted to make a piece that was inspired by the sort of topography and crevasses of the glaciers. And so I created this, I had an exhibition in Philadelphia, and part of the exhibition was this large painting on the left, which is thinking about, again, these undulating forms of the glacier. But I started getting dissatisfied with the boundaries of the canvas. And I wanted to break the boundaries of the canvas in some way and actually have these undulating forms take up space in physical space. And so I had an idea to take some of my painted forms and create vector form files out of them, digitize them, and then laser cut them out of steel. And so that's what you're seeing on the right, is laser cut steel installation that almost reads like paper cuts. And I love the sort of that play between something delicate and fragile with something more structural. This plays into a lot of the things that I think about in my work. I mentioned micro and macro, but I'm often sort of thinking about these juxtapositions and sort of polarities, seeming polarities that share space in my work. And so again, there's this idea of the delicacy and the structural quality of the steel. There's also thinking about the idea of hand and mechanical. These almost look like they're computer generated forms, but they're actually all hand-drawn lines that are then laser cut. And so from there, I was really excited about the possibilities. And I brought one of these pieces up and wanted to make it stand up off the ground and actually really share space off of the wall. And so when I did that, it was sort of this moment of, wow, this reminds me of clouds. And I envisioned like being in an airplane and looking down at a blanket of clouds. And I wanted to recreate that in a space. And so this sort of informed my next body of work, which was thinking about sky tone variations and cloud forms. And so I created an installation at the Bridgemere Gallery in Philadelphia, doing just that. I'm creating an installation of these forms that could read not only like cloud forms, but maybe a coral reef or mountainous terrain. And so I love, again, that ambiguity in form. This is for scale, my children at the time. These pieces are about 5 by 10 feet in scale. And I love this way that you can sort of move in and around the pieces, almost like a painting being deconstructed. It was sort of a moment for me to have an exhibition without any paintings on the wall in this space. And to know that I created something that was a more interactive type piece. Some of the paintings that did accompany this exhibition include these here, Blue Hour in the background, as well as this painting, Cumulonimbus. This painting is a good example of how I think about juxtapositions in terms of painting modalities in a work. Often thinking about painterly and atmospheric passages along with more intentional and graphic delineated passages, and thinking about the shift in speed that affords. Another mechanism I sometimes use is sort of butting up two different paintings together and confronting the viewer to look at different scales simultaneously. 2015 was a really big year for me in terms of my artistic growth, because I had my first public art project launch in 2015. I did this 40 by 70 foot installation at Temple University. It is called Sky Terrain. It involves 18 laser cut steel pieces, LED lights, and light sensors. And essentially, I was trying to recreate sky tone variations from dusk till dawn. You see here on the right, this is actually stars that are twinkling on the piece. It was something I was simulating in the piece to appeal to the students who had told me how sad they were that light pollution had obstructed their view of stars in the city of Philadelphia. So I created this piece to kind of emulate a starry night. Here's a time lapse showing some of the light shifts that happen in the piece. It was really wonderful to be able to work with a team of people on this project and to realize that when I work with others like fabricators, lighting designers, and architects, that I can create something bigger than I could on my own, just bigger in scope and able to reach a larger group of people, a larger community by having something outdoors that people come upon and stumble upon without being within the confines of a gallery. The other reason 2015 was such a big year for me was that around the time I was creating that piece, I also was invited to go out to sea for the first time. And so this was really the first time I collaborated directly with scientists. This was really a game changer for me with my work. we were actually sailing from the Galapagos to San Diego, and we were mapping the ocean floor. And so we were working with that same technology I was talking about earlier, the multi-beam sonar technology that takes 340 pings of sound waves and collects that data as it comes back up to the ship. And so we're able to create this swath of data as we're sailing over the land. We don't know what most of the ocean floor looks like, believe it or not, in high resolution. This is something that scientists are actively working towards understanding better. And so it was incredible to be able to see new terrain being revealed right before our eyes. And so I actually worked in a 4D modeling program and was able to take the data and then essentially be able to kind of swim through this kind of hidden terrain, this hidden landscape. And so this is actually underneath the Galapagos Islands, where I was sort of seeing this terrain. I would then take screen grabs from this sort of this fly through, if you will, and then incorporate them into paintings. In the meantime, though, we were we were trailing a hurricane in the Pacific Ocean, the East Pacific Ocean, as we sailed to California. And so in the moment, I spontaneously started pouring paint onto the canvas. I had a little tiny space set up in the wet lab of the ship. And I started pouring paint onto the canvas to kind of capture that motion of the ship and have it be a record on the canvas. And then from there, I would then superimpose these mapping data information into the paintings. And so these are some large paintings I created back in my Philadelphia studio that are part of this series, and really excited about sharing this kind of hidden landscape that most people will never see with their own eyes. And so these are some of the large scale paintings I did. I never realized how much I would fall in love with being out on the ocean and exploring with scientists. My husband jokes that he never saw it coming that I'd become a sailor when we got married. But here I was the following year going back out to sea on the Falkor research vessel, first off the coast of Tahiti and then sailing from Vietnam to Guam. And there we were exploring how the Mekong River disperses into the South China Sea and understanding the biology concentration in the water, the chlorophyll concentration, and so to understand the flow of biology. And so I was working with satellite data. I set up a studio in the wet lab of the ship and was painting, working with this information and different data sets, along with working with multi-beam sonar data that we were collecting, because we were also mapping the ocean floor on our way. And so in these years, I was really, this is 2016, I was really starting to develop relationships with other scientists and really expanding my network. And it was through this that I got invited into a really important project for me called the Ocean Memory Project. This is a transdisciplinary group of artists, scientists, and people in the humanities that are reframing our relationship with the ocean and thinking about the ocean and its inhabitants as sort of an interconnected living system that has agency and memory, and that environmental changes are recorded in the ocean through living things, through like their epigenetic processes, but also through the dynamic structure of the ocean itself. And this project has just been really life-changing for me. It's really forced me to think about the ocean in a different way, and it's really changed my relationship with the ocean and with the natural world. It was also through this project that I met a scientist named Mandy Joy. She's an oceanographer. And I said to her, you know, I've always dreamed of going down to the bottom of the ocean in a submersible. And she simply said, I'll take you. And it was really pretty much as simple as that. In 2018, I set sail off the coast of Mexico, as well as off the coast of Costa Rica on 2 separate trips. I went down into the bottom of the ocean in the submersible Alvin, which you can see here being recovered onto the ship. The other trip off the coast of Costa Rica was with the scientist Eric Cortez from Temple University. And these experiences were truly life-changing experiences. I'm going to tell you about one. This was off the coast of Mexico in Guaymas Basin. This is a fascinating place to understand ancient processes that are happening right now. These are ancient processes that really talk to us about the origins of life on our planet and the possibility for life on other planets. So here we're looking at 2 plates that are separating on the ocean floor. You can see the red line in the map. Those are two tectonic plates separating, but you have this nascent sea, the Gulf of California, that's surrounded by two land masses that are dropping sediment down on top of this, these hydrothermal vents. So when you have two plates separating, you have hydrothermal vents, which are essentially fissures in the ocean floor that are allowing chemicals to spew out and also superheated water to spew out. And so the life that you see here in this picture and the shimmering water is the superheated water, but you're seeing chemosynthetic life that is subsisting in the most inhospitable and hostile environment imaginable. You have organisms that are subsisting off the chemicals. And so, but not only that, because of these land masses that are dropping down sediment, all of this heat and pressure is causing these chemicals to transform into oil orders of magnitude faster than they do normally. And so this is a really unique place of the world that scientists are studying to understand how our planet works and to understand how life started. On this ship and on all the trips that I've taken with scientists, they have been the most wonderful collaborative environments. We talked a little bit about synergy before when people were entering the room. The synergy on a ship and the synergy of working with scientists in the same space together is hard to describe. But all I can say is that when you work together, you feed off of one another. And it's so important that scientists and artists have that opportunity to be working together, because when you're siloed, you're not having that kind of joint exchange. And so for me, of course, I'm being inspired by the scientists and the work that they're doing and their passion for what they do. And the scientists were equally being inspired by me and even seeing their own work in a different light. And so it's that exchange that's really kind of indescribable, and it's that synergy that's more than the sum of its parts. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the technology of just going down to the bottom of the ocean, which is pretty fascinating. Here on the right, you can see this is the 6-foot titanium sphere that is where 2 passengers and the pilot reside. You can see our samples in the foreground. When you're climbing in the hatch and climbing into this vessel, you feel like you're an astronaut exploring deep space. It is quite indescribable. The interior of this vessel is actually very, very claustrophobic. You can't really stand up in it. The right picture doesn't do it justice, but it's also extremely cold when you get down to the bottom of the ocean. You are actually at ambient temperature. You are also in a highly flammable environment because there's so much oxygen inside the vessel. And so you have to actually wear non-synthetic clothing to stay warm. Descending the water column for an hour and a half in the darkness is probably the most spiritual experience I've ever had. All I could see, for as far as I could see, was bioluminescent life. And I knew that I wanted to take that experience and translate that into an art piece to share with others. Here are some stills of some of the video footage you saw earlier. Again, these are chemosynthetic organisms that are thriving in the dark. These are Riftia tube worms, along with these yellow microbial mats that are feeding off the bacteria. Here's another image of that. It's wild to think that there is this really thriving ecosystem. There's also megafauna that I don't have pictured, like crabs and octopi that are living in the darkness. Here are some of these bacterial mats, and we're taking samples of them, bringing them back up onto the ship. What's fascinating to me is that when you actually start looking at these mats, you see this architecture that they start to create. If you look in the lower left, you're almost seeing this sort of tetrahedral matrix that they're creating. It's incredible to me that they are building this architecture to maximize their own growth, to maximize the flow of oxygen and hydrogen sulfide in order to grow and proliferate. I see these systems and these networks at different scales in nature, and I'm fascinated by those connections. Looking under the microscope, you can see these bacteria organized into filaments, into these sort of colonial shapes. I was painting on the ship, looking at these different networks that the microbes create, and then back in Philadelphia, making large-scale painting installations, working with the same ideas. Mandy Joy, my collaborator I mentioned, the oceanographer, is a professor at the University of Georgia. So the university invited me as a visiting chair to the university because they were really interested in our collaboration, and they invited me to have a show at the Georgia Museum of Art. And so I created this large-scale painting installation. It's about 22 feet tall, that's looking at the microbial networks. and thinking about these matrices that are happening at the very bottom of the ocean. I also worked with a lot of student groups to share this understanding of the ocean and to connect them more deeply with the ocean world. One of the things I was really excited about that came out of this project was the installation of Shimmer on the right. Shimmer is an interactive piece that involves hydrocarbon structures. The pieces themselves are inspired by hydrocarbon structures that make up the oil that I mentioned is forming at Guaymas Basin. They are backlit with LED lights and motion sensors. What I did was I actually programmed individual LEDs to mimic bioluminescent patterns of the siphonophore, which is one of the organisms that is prevalent at Guaymas Basin. And so what happens is when you walk by the piece, there are motion sensors on either end of the piece that set off a disturbance in the piece that mimics the siphonophore. And here's a short video of what I'm talking about. So when you walk by the piece, it sets off this disturbance in the piece. And so it's almost as if you as the viewer are the predator and you're having this experience with the piece. I really enjoyed the sort of interactive component of this project, and I'm really looking to do more projects like this that become even more interactive and more immersive in a space that you can enter. In addition, I've done other public art projects that I wanted to talk a little bit about. This is called Convergence. It's in Philadelphia. It's a meditation on the Schuylkill River and surrounding environments. I was really interested in sort of capturing not only the crisscrossing of lines and transport in Philadelphia, but also to capture the cultural relevance of this location in Philadelphia, where a festival takes place every summer that starts right at the South Street Bridge that you can see on the right. It's the Adunde Festival, which is a celebration of African heritage. And so I wanted to capture the colors that accompany that festival alongside in this mural. Turns out that I am not afraid of going down to the bottom of the ocean, but I'm terrified of heights. It was really exciting but scary to work on this project. I had an amazing team that did a lot of the work. But so here you can see really a reference to that Adunde Festival. And then the other side, which is sort of these crisscrossing lines that kind of lead you to the skyline. And so for me, it was really wonderful to have an opportunity to have a piece that's so visible in Philadelphia that really has become sort of a kind of a landmark mural with the skyline. And so to be able to have millions of people kind of passing by this mural on a daily basis is really gratifying, and to be able to kind of change somebody's experience that's passing by from what used to be just a barren wall. As much as that project sort of humanizes the built environment, I created this piece in rural Pennsylvania that really kind of is harmonious within a natural environment. And I really have been excited about having the opportunity to do some projects here at the Bauer Sculpture Park. This is actually a 9 by 70 foot plasma cut Corten steel installation. It weighs 17 tons, and it is inspired by Ecoregion and geologic maps of central Pennsylvania. And so I was interested in looking at these maps of the Appalachian Mountains that course through Pennsylvania, and specifically looking at the Pennsylvania salient, which is an area of dramatic bends and folds in a portion of Pennsylvania. And you can see here in the second panel that's being raised, the Pennsylvania salient. But this piece was an engineering feat to kind of install and to fabricate. I didn't want to work with any welds because of temperature shifts in the environment and thermal expansion and contraction. So we worked with a tongue and groove system to piece it together. And so it was really wonderful to work on this project, in particular because of the way it shifts through the seasons. And so that's something that has been really unusual for me to see. It doesn't happen as much in the city environment as it does here. It was important for me to work with also materials that were local to central Pennsylvania, and to work with forms that would also kind of mimic the meadow grasses. And again, thinking about this duality in my work, these sort of delicate organic forms that are a counterpoint to the very, massive 1.5 inch thick structural steel construction. In the wintertime, the piece it really kind of expands through light and shadow, and so the footprint of the piece becomes this sort of beautiful drawing on the snow, which I really was sort of a kind of a exciting moment for me when I first saw that. One of the important things about this project was not wanting to waste the cutouts, which were really quite massive, considering this piece was 1.5 inches thick. And so I wanted to, instead of discarding these pieces, I wanted to use them. And so I ended up creating this piece in the woods on another part of the property of the sculpture park, where I laid out a path in the woods. And this piece is a piece that is really more of a time-based piece in the landscape. We planted local mosses that have continued to grow in the spaces in between the cutouts of the larger piece. And so this has been a really wonderful opportunity to kind of see it sort of meld into the landscape. The process of making this piece was also very different from the larger piece, in the sense that, here's a little time lapse of me making it. You know, it was a very kind of intuitive, process-oriented, improvisational process to put together, and I kept moving pieces around to see what would work. And again, very different from the fabrication design process that I went through for the larger piece. In addition, I made a painting for the welcome center of this Bower Sculpture Park that's inspired by LiDAR data of the Appalachian Mountains in that location. I wanted to briefly touch on a few more projects, and I hope I'm not going to go over time, but in the pandemic, I worked with a couple of other scientists. I did other collaborations. This is with a biotech company looking at, they were working on antibody research for the COVID vaccine actually during the pandemic. And I was there during the pandemic working with, they have a technology that allows you to visualize how cells become infected with the virus. And so I was able to visualize this and actually work with time-lapse video of this visualization, as well as looking at cells themselves and how they connect to one another in our bodies. And so thinking about these networks and these matrices that are happening, I made paintings on a large scale that were exhibited in Philadelphia in conjunction with this residency, as well as this interactive installation, which involves the time lapse I was just talking about, with looking at cells as they start to become infected with the virus. But this piece is a little bit different. It has an audio component, and I'm going to play for you a clip here. You're not going to see anything at first, but you're going to listen to the sound of data. I actually, in addition to the glowing of the cells as they become infected by the virus, thinking about that kind of micro view of the pandemic, I wanted to take a macro view and think about how the virus was infecting the community in Philadelphia. So I worked with COVID cases, deaths, and vaccinations, and sonify that data and put them to sound. So you can imagine, like, looking at the waves of COVID cases. We all did it for the pandemic. This time I wanted to have sound. And so I worked with a composer who did this thing into each layer. And so first you have cases, and that's kind of follow behind. And you have vaccinations that follow later, and that are more high-pitched tone. And so it's kind of interesting process to sonify the data and to hear how the vaccine made kids go down. And it's kind of an amazing experience for me to work with the composer. I also had the Pennsylvania Philharmonic perform the piece live at the closing reception. Another, I'm going to briefly touch on another residency and collaboration I did was with a planetary geologist looking at microscopic views of tiny fragments of meteorites from Mars and elsewhere, and seeing these intricate networks of crystallization that are happening in these tiny fragments that have been hyper magnified, and making paintings about them. And so kind of working with Julia Cartwright at University of Alabama was really inspiring. Through our conversations, I learned so much about not only like the crystallization process, but the trajectory that these meteorites took to arrive to our planet. In particular, this is the iron meteorite. And what was so striking to me is that this is a 4.5 billion year old rock that came from the core of a planet that never survived, that has this beautiful, pristine geometry in it that has been preserved. And so I traced that geometry and made paintings inspired by it. In addition, thinking again about these trajectory that these meteorites took, being bombarded by cosmic rays over the course of millions of years before even landing on our planet. But getting back to thinking about that six-fold symmetry I mentioned in the iron meteorite, to me, sorry, that just went ahead. Thinking about that six-fold symmetry, and you can see it in the painting on the right, that same symmetry happens here on our planet in snowflakes and ice crystals. So to imagine that we're connected to fragments of our solar system in that way through these universal kind of systems. Throughout all of these collaborative projects, I'm painting in the studio, thinking about fractal patterns found in nature, thinking about micro and macro, thinking about bioluminescent communication, thinking about microbial networks and these webs of interactivity that are happening at the bottom of the ocean. And wanting to sort of share that kind of those matrices and those worlds that are hidden, that are around us, that are surrounding us that we're not aware of or maybe not thinking about, and thinking about how we are all connected with the natural world and not separate from. Here are a couple more paintings from this sort of ongoing series. This is an exhibit in Philadelphia from last year. And I'm hopefully I'm almost finished here. I know I'm about to go overtime here, but this is a recent expedition I just took off the coast of Hawaii. We were exploring a submarine volcano and looking through a remotely operated vehicle, trying to understand the processes that are happening there. If you can imagine, this could be the surface of Mars, but it's actually on our planet. We are looking at all of the yellow is microbial life that's living off iron alone. Iron that's coming out of the water. We could be, this is the control van of the ship looking through the eyes of the remotely operated vehicle that's being recovered on the right here. But you could be looking at the surface of Mars. This could be mission control exploring Mars. It's amazing to think that this is what life could be like on other planets, and it's right here. I was making paintings on the ship, working with their multi-beam sonar technology as well, which we were mapping along the way, and also looking at these microbes that you just saw, the yellow microbes, and how they form these intricate networks when you look at them under the microscope. Lastly, I just wanted to close. I'm having a show right now, as Deirdre mentioned, at the National Academy of Sciences. This is an immersive video installation that incorporates deep sea video footage, computer modeling of actually one of my paintings to sort of simulate how microbes grow in the ocean and how they're mediating processes on our planet. There's an expression, there's a quote by Sylvia Earle, a well-known oceanographer, that says, with every drop of water you drink, with every breath of air you take, you're connected back to the ocean, because these microbes at the bottom of the ocean are actually mediating the air we breathe. And without them, we would not survive. And yet we feel so disconnected. Many feel so disconnected and could not imagine that there's any relationship between us and them. And so this piece is about trying to connect people and trying to create a sense of awe and wonder with the natural world and a sense of connection. In addition, I have a project that's hopefully going to be launching this year. It is an immersive multi-sensory art installation that will have a second life as an artificial reef in the deep sea in the Gulf of Mexico. And this is part of a project to restore deep sea coral reefs that were damaged in the Deepwater Horizon oil spill from 2010. And this piece will be interactive with light and sound, and it will be 3D printed with sustainable materials that will be modular to create a monumental installation. One thing I'm really excited about with this piece is this idea of really going beyond, resonating beyond aesthetics and thinking about the potential ecological, positive ecological impacts that this piece could have. I wanted to close with, talking about this book, before I do that, sorry, this skipped over. I just want to mention I'm going back out to sea in 2024 with Mandy Joy back to Guaymas Basin, and we'll be exploring more this incredible place to understand processes that are happening on our planet. And I just wanted to say that, you know, I wanted to close with thinking about Under the Sky We Make, which I know you guys are reading. You know, it really spurs readers to grapple with the realities of climate change and to recognize our own role in combating the crisis. And, you know, each of us, you know, she really talks about each of us adapting our own skills and talents towards being ambassadors and in our own communities. And so moving from that exploitation mindset to a regeneration mindset where we are not separate from, but we are connected with the natural world and we need to protect it. That we are a living entity, that the earth is a living entity that we are a part of. And so as artists, we have this amazing power to really address the contemporary issues of our time. And for me, I find a lot of meaning in creating work that can really, hopefully, inspire connection with the natural world and hopefully, you know, foster a sense of stewardship and empathy in the face of climate change. So thank you so much. And sorry if I went over time.
Not at all. That was amazing. Thank you. I feel like I know you so well, and now I like have even more deep respect for you. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
So Stacy, how should we do this? Because I realize there's probably some folks on in the Zoom room that would like to ask questions, and then we also have some students live in the classroom. So should we start with some questions on Zoom first, do you think, Stacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can open it up to both at the same time. If we have folks on Zoom who are interested in asking questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or to add a question into the chat, and then we can also do the same in your classroom, Deirdre. I see that Dr. Shahagian would like to ask a question. I don't know if we want to start with you.
Sure, that's fine. That was actually really amazing, and I love that you're the public aspect where you bring art to everybody, not just stuck in a museum or a gallery somewhere, and that's really special. You know, it's really cool what you do down the ocean floor and the mid-ocean ridges, and I'm very impressed with your facility with the science. That's cool. Something that struck me is you're down there, you know, imaging all these biota in the deep dark of the ocean with vibrant colors, right? Now, nobody can see those colors, and I wonder why evolutionarily they develop such colorful forms, or if it's just a happenstance, a coincidence that they just made colors that we can see when we shine a light on them. Is that kind of amazing?
It is amazing, and it's kind of mind-blowing because you know, so a lot of those microbial mats that are these bright yellows and sometimes pinks and oranges, it's based on, I believe, based on the concentration of hydrogen sulfide. And so yeah, I mean, I am not, I couldn't scientifically answer that, but it is incredible to me that there's this vibrant, colorful world happening that we can't see, you know, and that they can subsist and communicate with one another this way. It is really fascinating. And I appreciate what you're saying. And I wanted to touch on one thing you said, which is that, you know, to me, it's really important to have the work shown in different kinds of venues and have the work accessible, because again, it's about this idea of being siloed. You know, scientists can have their research, and if only scientists are reading the papers, that kind of connection isn't happening. And so for me, I want the work to be exhibited in art museums or science museums or out in the public space, you know, the public realm, so that, you know, people can have access to it that are not primed to have that experience, and that can then just sort of be open and engage with it and learn something, you know, because for me, the work is about not only the aesthetic experience, but also the educational component, which is a secondary, but very, very important to me. So.
It's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys have questions? Anybody want to go down an avenue?
I have a quick question. So thank you so much for coming. First of all, I'm so inspired by your work, and I've actually been lucky enough to see the University of Georgia work.
Oh, cool.
So I loved it when I was able to see it in person. But as someone who's very interested in scientific artwork, I wanted to ask how you navigate getting these wonderful research opportunities, because you've been all over the world in so many fun places. And like, do you have a personal favorite, which I know is probably so hard to narrow it down, but.
Well, first of all, I think thank you so much. And I'm so glad you got to see that piece in Georgia. I think that, it's really important to really, as you become an artist or do whatever you're going to do, whether you're a scientist or whatnot, is to sort of shape to create your reality. I don't know if that makes any sense, but to really to go for it. I love to travel, and I knew that I wanted to see these places and to learn about these places. So early on, I was applying to these programs, and sometimes they were funded, sometimes I had to contribute a portion, to do it. I'd have to get, funding to do it. But I wanted to make it a reality, and so then from there, as I've gotten older and as my, networks and relationships have expanded, oftentimes I'm invited to go out on these trips now. And so one of the really amazing things, and one of the ways in which I really do believe that art and science and artists are being valued more, is that a lot of the trips I go on to see are funded by the National Science Foundation. Now, scientists need to get grants from the National Science Foundation to get the ship time and to have the money to pay their employees and to have everybody go on the ship. And so in these grants, the National Science Foundation is requiring scientists to have what they call an outreach component, which can be an artist, it can be a photojournalist, it can be a writer. And so it's an opportunity where scientists then will invite me as that arm of outreach. And so the scientific community really values that. And it's important, there's also Schmidt Ocean Institute, which is an actual organization, a nonprofit organization they have an Artists at Sea program, and that I went out with them. That was a couple of the trips that I went on. So there are opportunities out there, and I really think that it's starting to happen more. And I think it's so important that artists are valued, and that it's not just the word there on the side painting a pretty picture. There's actually a synergy that's happening when artists and scientists work together. So
Thank you.
thanks. Oh, you asked if I had a favorite place. I would say Guaymas Basin. I mean, I've been really fortunate to have, the opportunity to have seen a lot of really amazing places, but I would say going down in Alvin to the, bottom of the ocean at Guaymas Basin was truly epic. So.
Thank you. And thank you, Emma, for asking that question. Emma's a painting student and also neuroscience, cognitive science student.
Wow.
And so one of the things I wanted to put out there to our LUAG folks is there are grants available to the students, like the Stroll grant. I've had a number of my students receive that grant and been able to do research. So Emma or anybody, if you've got an idea for a project that you'd like to pursue, there are definitely systems in place, grants, the field trips through earth and environmental science, or the field schools. I don't know what they're called, Dork, but like that, there's a ton of opportunities. So like Rebecca's saying, just kind of manifest those, make them happen, start asking questions, and where can you get the funding, and make your dreams a reality for sure.
Yeah, Lehigh's really good about that sort of thing. Anything you want to do, it can be made possible. You need some money, they'll find a way. And yes, Rebecca, I'd like to I would introduce you to our very own Jill McDermott, who also drives the Alvin and has many ships and goes down to the East Pacific Rise. And you may want to connect with
I know her. I know of her from
okay.
But I didn't realize she was a Lehigh.
She's right here at Lehigh, and she's teaching class right now.
That's amazing.
She was going to be here otherwise. She was.
Oh, that's too bad. I know of her from the circles that I'm in. I know her name, and that's amazing. I'd love to meet her.
Well, I'll tell her about this, and this was recorded so she could see it as well.
Oh, that's great. Okay, that's fabulous.
And I don't know if Deirdre mentioned about my affliction writing silly limericks. Um, but let's see if I got it. I'll regale you with what passes for poetry in some circles and not others. Right? Let's see here if I can get it right. Science embodies art when they combine that make combinations that nicely align. When synergy thrives, it brightens our lives, creating gestalt that is truly divine.
I love it.
That's, did you just write that as she was giving her talk?
Yeah, what else?
I know.
I mean, that is really truly like, that is my mantra. Thank you. Thank you,
So there
Dorothy.
you go.
Can you send me that? I want to.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll
That's
I'll
awesome.
connect you guys for sure. Well, we have just a few more minutes before I know I'm sadly our climate change class has to actually go into production mode because the students are having a show at the Nurture Nature Center, which opens April 14th. So
Wow.
yes, disrupted forest. So they're making a recycled forest and looking at trees and birds on the PA conservation watch list. That are harmed by climate change. So we do have like a minute more. So if anybody's got a question for Rebecca Rutstein, otherwise follow her on Instagram, check out her show in Philly, right, in Delaware. And if you're in DC, those shows were up through when? What are the dates?
The video piece is up at the National Academies through middle of September, and the show at Delaware County Community College is open through April 14th. So, yeah.
And you're giving a lecture in Delaware as well, right? Or
On Tuesday. Yeah.
okay.
It's been the week of lectures. I had 2 other ones this week.
Right, you're at Georgetown as well. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. This was just amazing. And I'm so glad we have it recorded so we can share it with folks that weren't able to be here. And we're just eager to get you back for like a full day next year where we can really kind of do workshops and crits and just get more of your amazing expertise on campus. So
That would be wonderful. I would love that. It was so nice to be with you guys today.
awesome. All right, well, we're going to let you go. Stacy, Brennan, thank you so much for hosting and recording. And thank you to Lehigh University Art Gallery and Earth and Environmental Science, because this was just a wonderful event.
Deirdre, thanks for making this possible. And Rebecca, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it. Have a great
Sure.
weekend.
All right. Take care,
Look forward
everyone.
to being in touch.
Thank you.
Bye.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.